Hi, and welcome to another edition of Todd Talk, where we take educational theory and turn it into educational practice. So the holiday season is upon us, as you can see, by evidenced by my ugly Christmas sweater. And with the holiday season coming near, one thing I noticed on that last day of school before the holiday break is that I walk around, and what I notice in a lot of classrooms is that there's no teaching going on and no learning going on. People consider it a throwaway day, both students and teachers, and they figure, why should we try to have kids learn anyways? And oftentimes, what I see is that they're showing movies, and kids are passively sitting watching movies. So I think this is a real missed opportunity in that this is the last day before kids are going to be taking a break from school. So essentially, kids are going to be taking 2 weeks off of not thinking and learning and doing the things that school provides for them. And we're going to spend the last day right before that just doing what they're going to be doing on their break. And so I think we need to seize this opportunity and have it, be a learning day, especially because kids are going to be getting that break. They need learning right up until the very end. So today's top topic is going to be 5 things that you can do that are much better than showing a movie on the last day before holiday break. So, suggestion number one is, if you want to have things where kids are having fun and because it is the last day before holiday break, you could play board games. At least it's not passive. Kids are active when they're playing board games. And board games, especially if you pick the right ones, can be educational. They can be teaching kids things as they're playing the board game through the process of it, and they're not even realizing it. So a couple of examples I'll give you of board games you could play. So Scattegories is one that you could play with a whole class. So if you have a class of 25 to 30 kids, you could play Scattegories. And Scattegories is if you've never played it, it's very simple. You roll a multi-sided dice that has all the letters of the alphabet, and you get that letter, and then you have these 12 categories that you have to come up with a word that starts with the letter that you rolled. So let's say you rolled a C and it asks for a city. So you would maybe put Cleveland or Charlotte or whatever. And so you try to complete your list using words that start with that letter. And why I like this game is because, first off, it builds vocabulary. So kids really have to think about the words that they're using. They can get double scores for, alliteration. If they have, like, if it's a sports team and it's the Cleveland Cavaliers, that would be double because it's two C's. And the other thing it does is it has kids, kind of naturally lends itself to having kids having to be creative, because the rules of the game is, if you have a term that someone else has, then it negates the terms. In other words, if I pick Cleveland as my city and someone else picked Cleveland, then it wouldn't count. But so I want to be more creative, and I want to maybe come up with a smaller town, Coshocton, maybe that people wouldn't normally put. So you're not going to put the most obvious thing. You're going to put things that maybe more are outside the box. So that's one game that you could play. A second game is Telestrations. And Telestrations is kind of like a visual version of the game of telephone. Where you start with a term, and you write that term down, and you pass this pad to the next person. And they have to flip the page, and they have to after looking at the term, they have to try to come up with a drawing that represents that term. So let's say the term was house. They would have to draw something that looks like a house, and hope that the person, when they see that, are going to guess house, because the next person gets passed to the next person. They take a look at the picture and then have to take a guess. And so, and then that past that, and the next person draws something from the term that has been put down. So if the person saw it as a house and wrote down house, then that's what the next person is going to try to draw too. But if the person saw, like, maybe a hotel or a school or something else, then that person might take the drawing in a much different direction. And so when you go through it plays 8 people. When it goes through the 8 people, what you hope is that your term makes it all the way through the putting the term and drawing it, putting the term and drawing it, so on and so forth. When it gets to the end, that what it started with is what it ends with. I like this because it has kids having to be visual with their thinking. So when they're, and you don't have to be a great drawer for Telestrations. You just have to be logical and make sure that what you're drawing makes sense to others. You have to communicate, which is a great skill to be learning. So that's a great game to play. So in the spirit of the holidays, I have the 12 games that have on my website at My Ed Expert on my vendor page. The link is seen right here. And it's a free download, and you can look through, and there are 12 other games that you could possibly play with students during that day before the holiday break. So the second thing you could be doing with kids is STEM design challenges. And STEM design challenges are different than STEM design projects. STEM design projects tend to be long-term, so a week, 2 weeks, maybe more. STEM design challenges usually can be done in a day. And so you set up a challenge and you have the materials, and kids are executing that challenge on that day. So some examples of this is that you could have Stop the Avalanche, where an avalanche is going to hit the town, and you have to figure out a way to prevent this from happening or to protect the town from the avalanche. So how would you create something that would help to do that? So that could be a STEM design challenge. One that I like to use because it's really simple, but at the same time, you get a lot of different responses, is the egg drop challenge. And the egg drop challenge is simply kids have a list of things, and they have to choose 5 items that they are going to make their vessel out of. And they're going to make this vessel that they will put their egg in, and they will drop this vessel from a height, could be, 10 feet, 20 feet, whatever. If you're on a second floor, that's always fun to try different heights. But basically, the egg has to survive the fall using only the vessel to protect it. The important part about doing a STEM design challenge is that you use the STEM design engineering design process, which means you start with the ask, where kids are asking questions, you give them constraints, they try to imagine what their challenge is, what they're going to create for their challenge, and then they have to actually plan it, to take this imagination, put it into a plan. They have to actually create what they have come up with. And probably the most important step of the engineering design process is the improvement. So what can they do to ensure that it's going to work well? What can they do to make sure that it's going to work effectively? So through trial and error, they will try to improve it. So a third thing that you could be doing during this time is projects of high interest. So the way I would do in my own class, the way I would set things up is I was doing all project-based learning. So I would have the due date for the project right before the day before holiday break. And so students would be working on a long-term project, and then either their displaying of what they learned would have to be on that day, whether it be an exhibition, whether it be a performance. If I was going to have them presenting to a panel, I would invite panel guests to come in that day. Considering it's the last day before holiday break, people's schedules are usually a little more flexible, and so it was always a good day to have that display of what they had learned. And so it just was a normal school day where kids were learning and showing what they had learned. Another thing you could do if you're just trying to have it for that single day is you could have like a miniature version of Genius Hour. If Genius Hour is where kids explore something that they're really interested in learning more about. And Genius Hour, the way it typically works is students work on this long term, but you could have a short-term Genius Hour project where kids are just researching for one day and having to share with the class what it is they learned about what they wanted to, what it was they were interested in. So high interest projects are another great alternative to showing a movie on that last day before the holiday break. The fourth thing that you could do is you could use visual writing prompts. I like these because, again, they're fun, especially depending on the prompt that you choose. And because kids are writing and they're doing things but it doesn't feel like schoolwork because the prompts are fun. So an example of this would be like this one right here. So where the prompt says, you just discovered a new species, describe what it is and why it hasn't been discovered before now. So you could do this with a science class where kids are going to have to talk about a new species using some of the information they have gathered about other species and the characteristics of these species. And then they have to come up with a creative way of why this has not been discovered before now. And they can turn to examples in the real world of scientific species that did not appear at first and that were discovered later. So this would be one writing prompt that you could use. A second writing prompt would be this one, which uses a little more imagination. So you get a set of magical sidewalk chalk. Anything you draw comes to life. Either describe what you will do with the chalk or create a list of rules from using the magical chalk. This harkens back to my younger days when I used to read Harold and the Purple Crayon. And I was always fascinated with Harold and the Purple Crayon because he could do so many cool things with it. And I wondered what I would do if I had a purple crayon. So this allows kids to do that. I also like the part where they have to create a list of rules for using it. So this has them create structure, even though they're imagining, they're being creative. They're having to have structure within that, and see how that there all are laws that have to be abided by, even with magical things. And so that would do that. So another writing prompt would be this one, which is describe a day in class from the teacher's point of view. So it would be really interesting if you had them take the final day before holiday break and take it from the teacher's point of view. Because, a lot of times, the teachers are just as anxious and just as excited for it to be there to be a holiday break as the kids are. And they're just as ready to be done with school as kids. So it would be interesting to put your kids in the shoes of of the teacher, and it may cause them to be more appreciative of what it is that you do as a teacher. Another prompt you could do if you're trying to keep up with the holiday spirit is creating, this one right here, which is one winter night when you are out for a walk, you hear a noise. When you investigate, you find a gathering of snowmen having a meeting in a snow cave. Finish the story. And so, the possibilities are endless. They could be having a lodge meeting where they're, trying to figure out ways to create, get more membership into the union. It could be that they're, trying to come up with ways to prevent from melting once the spring thaw comes. So all sorts of creative things that they could be doing there. So that's a fourth thing that you could be doing is visual writing prompts. The fifth thing I'm going to suggest are hands-on simulations. And hands-on simulations are just as they sound. They're active. They're having kids actually work with their hands. So in science, you could do like a cool lab right before break. If you're in social studies, you could do a simulation, whether it be like reenacting something that has happened as characters and role playing, or having a debate or something of that nature. One that I found that was really interesting involved, it's called Snowball Fight. And the idea of the snowball fight is that kids are going to learn how to compare and contrast. And so what they do is you create categories. And so you can compare characters, text, authors, setting, famous people, things, cities, things of that. And you're going to create these signs that go around the room. And these are going to guide the comparing and the contrasting. And so let's say you choose dog as one of your signs and cats as another one of your signs. Then students are going to create their snowballs. And so what they'll do is on a piece of paper, they will compare and contrast that term. So a cat or a dog, and they'll come up with a comparison and a contrast for that. And they'll write that down. So they'll have two snowballs in front of them as ammo. And so, you have them prepare this, you have them write this compare and contrast, and then what you do is you have the snowball fight itself. And you make sure that you are clear on the rules of the snowball fight, which is that they're allowed to throw the snowballs at each other. They're not going to hurt anybody, but they can't be too loud. They can't be, going crazy or knocking over furniture. They have to be, within the structure of the classroom. And so you have the snowball fight, and then you also tell them that when you yell the term freeze, that they must stop immediately what they're doing. And so after you yell, freeze, kids have to pick up a snowball. And then they have to, and individually they'll do this, and they'll unfurl their snowball, and they will try to figure out where the snowball, which category that you've placed it there, which one it fits into, and whether it's a compare or contrast. So this is just a nice way to for kids to have fun, but at the same time be learning how to do something. And also, it shows you if kids are like picking the wrong one consistently, it gives you a little bit of a pre-assessment that student really needs to work on that skill. And so, it can be a formative assessment as well. So there are 5 examples of things that are much better to do on the last day of holiday break besides showing a movie.